something that impresses upon us, or something that is made an impression upon us, or what is an impression is something that is very, very momentary, something that passes, something that comes to pass a little bit like love at first sight, attraction, something that catches your attention, isn't always something that is going to retain or keep your attention. For all of you who have been in any sort of relationship outside of your usual relationships at home, say your parents or your siblings, and if you've had a relationship outside of this, you know that the impression that you had right at the beginning and everything that has happened during the course of your relationship and wherever you are right now, which may be that you're still together with this person, you're not together with the person, are very, very different. Sometimes we complain that the first impression we had wasn't quite an accurate one. Sometimes we feel that we were right at first impression. Now, what is first impression and why is it so important and vital in a spiritual awakening? An impression is simply what it is, simply an impression. But an impression can tell us a lot about where we are, depending on how impressed we become, depending on where we go with this impression and what this impression becomes to us. When an impression gradually builds into something that you can trust, something that is tangible, something that you can grapple with, something that you can hold, and it isn't just something that is fleeting, and you've gone through the nuances of what that impression results in, then folks, this is where you then are ready to go on to the next stage after being impressed upon. Impressions, however, sometimes can become the be-all and end-all, so much so that we base absolutely everything and we judge it based off of this impression. We create a whole judgment. We create a whole story, a scenario about that with which we are impressed upon. An impression, folks, can be one that makes us feel good, one that doesn't. Anything that impresses upon us is something that catches our attention. Things that catch our attention for whatever reason, right? Things that impress upon us are things that have an impact on us that's going to sway us in a particular direction. Impressions can sometimes become the very impediments, because sometimes an impression needs to evolve into something else. Sometimes you need to go beyond that which you have been impressed upon. Now remember, an impression is very, very temporary. That's why it's called an impression. An impression is not the real thing. An impression is not going to give you the totality or the whole gist of something. It's simply an impression. So if you like, it's even less than an X-ray, right? It doesn't go into the depth of anything when what you see or what you sense with your five senses has impressed upon you, and based off that impression, you then decide to take certain actions and you go with those actions. These impressions, folks, are important. They're important insofar as they tell a story about us. Now, how they start to tell a story about us is what do we do about this impression and how that impression has made us feel. Sometimes we look at certain people and all we are seeing is what it is about them that has struck us, that has impressed upon us. It might be the way that somebody speaks, the way that they present themselves, in so many different ways. Sometimes the impression that we have of somebody, right? So it's not even that I'm so impressed, no, but that impression that we have of somebody isn't correct, isn't really what it is, but we are seeing through a lens of a perception that we have become habituated with that, whatever that person represents. So if you see somebody and they look in a particular way, we immediately jump to a conclusion, and that's the impression that we have gathered. So when you first, you just look at something and you pick it up and you read it, you gain a certain impression. It gives you an impression. But that impression is simply what it is. It's very transitory. It is not something that is there that has any real root in it. It is simply an impression. So an impression is almost like a facade. It's almost like something that's there, like an illusion. But it begs a deeper analysis. And that's why we call it an impression, a fingerprint impression, a thumb impression, a hand impression. Yeah. So when we can dive into something beyond the impression, now going to our spiritual awakening. Initially, the path of spiritual awakening is pretty impressive. We are impressed by the bliss. We are impressed by all of these moments of ananda, the moments of ecstasy and everything else. And for some time, we are impressed. But when we start to go through the purging, and remember, the purging starts to feel like we're more welcome once we embrace the responsibility of our own spiritual awakening to us, as opposed to the happening of anything outside of us. Because when you embrace yourself and you take charge and you say, this is the way I want my crap to come out. I want all of these things to come out that stand in my way, though I have my blinkers on. And you call yourself out and you say, no, the way that things transpired, you call yourself out. You can change everything. Now, when all of that happens, when you start to go beyond the impression of a spiritual awakening, you then start to go into the subtleties of a spiritual awakening and what it really means to actually just be authentic, to be you, whichever you it is, and for you to rely upon yourself, to see yourself through a neutral lens. When you apply your neutral lens of perception, now what happens here magically is very seldom will you become impressed. You no longer are impressionable. You no longer are at the behest of an impression. Yeah? So, whatever you see, when we say all that glitters is not gold, right? And all that glitters is also not gold. Yeah? So when you see a spiritual yogi driving a Ferrari, I'm giving you a very pedantic example, but this is just to give you the other side. Yeah? But they can be a very realized guru and who actually has a lot of wisdom to pass. Yeah. Then you'll have another one living in a mud hut. And actually, there may be something behind that, and actually it's something else. It's just a facade. Yeah. So your spiritual awakening gives you that clarity. It gives you the clear lens through which you are no longer impressed upon. But you trust. It's very, very different, folks, from going by impression and going by clarity. When we are clear, all the extras around, or the lack of extras around, don't mean anything. You're able to see beyond impression. When we're able to see beyond impression, we are now seeing. We are now in the know. When we are going by impression, right? And this is when, when you meet someone for the first time, you've met somebody for the first time, and you're impressed. You're impressed upon. They made an impression on you. But with your spiritual awakening, very, very unlikely that you're going to be impressed upon by anything that is skin deep. You're able to see everything clearly. So whatever may be presented in front of you, you see it for what it is, not for what it appears to be, what it may want to appear to be, or what your pre-existing conditioning may be tempted to perceive it to be based on a temporary impression, because your spiritual awakening has gotten crystal clear. Sending you so much love, clarity. Take care.